Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reviews That Don't Matter with Jessica Hitt. My name is Jessica Hitt, and on today's episode, yes, you read the title, you know what just came out last night. That is Westworld Season 2 premiere, and I'm just as confused as ever. First things first, if you've not seen my reviews of Westworld Season 1, I did sort of a sort of mid-season review, and then I did a finale review, where I did that last summer is when I first watched it, I believe. Probably like June-ish, maybe July, maybe earlier. I don't quite remember, but I think it's somewhere in there. So if you've not seen those, go check those out. Also, just a warning, I really should not even have to warn you, but this is going to be spoiler-filled. Obviously, this is a recap and review of the season premiere, so that's your fault if you get spoiled and you keep watching this. So your last warning is right now. Turn off, go watch Westworld, come back here, watch this, because I need them views. Episode 1 started off with this interesting conversation with Dolores and either Bernard or Arnold. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm pretty sure it's Arnold. It takes me probably about a minute or two to understand that this is like way in the past. This is before the park opened, and Dolores was one of the, basically, he was giving her all of the clues she needed to find her consciousness and finish the maze in her head. And so it's just this really interesting conversation that I never thought they'd start off the season like that, especially considering the last episode left off with Dolores shooting, what's his name? Oh, what is his name? I already forgot. I really should have rewatched this show. Anthony Hopkins' character, the guy who runs the place, shooting him in the head and then opening fire on all of the board members of Delos and Westworld and all these parks. And I'll tell you what, didn't end up well. And then we kind of fast forward to what I think is the morning after all of what's happened, and you have this now sort of military team, I'm assuming a private sector military team that has been hired by Delos, coming, and they find Arnold lying out on the beach, and he's very disoriented, and we're all really confused. And Ashley Stubbs, the other Hemsworth brother, Chris Hemsworth, I believe is his name, he's like, hey, no, this is like the big boss man, can't kill him. And you see all these like priority red cards, I'm assuming to save these people. And just a reminder, the last time we saw Stubbs is when he was being taken away by the Ghost Nation Native Americans, and we don't know exactly anything that happened or why he's where he is. I guess that's another thing that's going to unravel unless they just completely forget about that storyline. Which, let's be real, they're not going to forget about that. They don't forget about anything in Westworld. Like, it's very tightly woven. And we basically see these tiny operations of how this new military team are basically executing all of these hosts who were off their loop. They're not exactly conscious like Dolores is, but they're a little bit more aware. They can go wherever they want to. They can cross parks, we see later. And so, they're executing them. And Bernard's not taking well to that. And it's just kind of this, what is going on type of thing. And then you finally understand that this has been 11 days after the big massacre, and we're kind of going back and forth. So we go back to that night where all of the hosts have decided to kill these actual people, which they're not allowed to in this park. And you kind of see this group of survivors from the board. You see Bernard's in there. You have Tessa Thompson's character, Charlotte, I believe is her name, and a couple of other nameless people. And they're all trying to sneak away from all of these deadly hosts, and they're running, and they go to a certain place, and they fall into a trap, and a lot of them get killed. But of course, the two names, Charlotte and Bernard, do not. Bernard figures it out, pulls her aside, and she brings them to this secret lab that brings us these really cool host drones, those white sort of alien-like muscle and skeletal thing, which is super creepy. They're I guess they are taking DNA from the people that are attending the parks from the hosts, and that's completely illegal to take DNA like that without any sort of knowing, unless they're totally signing their life away when they sign those release forms into the park. Who knows? Very well could be. But of course they don't know what's happening. And we also find out that Bernard is basically almost catastrophic. His host body is basically dying, and so he really gross, he takes this sort of the brain fluid that they have out of this one guy into his own to keep him a little stable for a while, I guess. I think he's still pretty catastrophic, but it helps him in a way. I'm not 100% sure. Charlotte, I think, feels like something's going on, but we don't know. And then we also don't know what happened to Charlotte. Like, did they get split up? Does she figure out that he's a host? Who knows? Because she's nowhere in the present, which is the 11 days after where we picked up with Bernard on the beach with all of the military people. Does this make sense? Because I can barely make sense of this. Like, oh, these timelines are so crazy. At least we know we're going into a season that has multiple timelines. In the first Westworld, I had no clue that there are multiple timelines going at the same time. And at the same time as in the present, the 11 days after the massacre, I think, or maybe kind of in between that at some point, I think it's pretty much close to the Bernard that we first see, not the massacre Bernard with Tessa Thompson's character. So basically, Dolores is going around with Teddy, James Marsden's character, and they are sort of hunting off these remaining human people. And then also, she is taking out other hosts and saying things like, not all of us can make it to the promised land type of stuff. So I don't quite know what that's all about. And she seems pretty like, she's the only one that's conscious. She's the only one that's fully conscious. She's basically the leader of this bloody rebellion. So she's talking to Teddy, and she's trying to tell him about all of this stuff, and you know, that he's the one constant in her storylines that everyone's giving her. He, of course, doesn't quite understand what all this is about because he's still in the mind that he's Teddy Flood, which is a great name. Teddy Flood of Westworld, and he's like the gunslinger, and she's still the prairie girl, whatever. And then we don't see too much from her. We see her with this really self-imposing monologue to these poor people who are like tied up with a noose around their hanging on, standing on these crosses, which, I mean, is pretty easy to get out of. Like, I was kind of looking at that, and she was like, she was basically letting them live, because all they had to do was stay on the cross and then just lift their hands up, because it's not behind them, lift their hands up and get the noose around, and then they can jump off. That's pretty easy. Unless you freak out, like the lady looks like she's about to freak out. Of course, she's in heels, and that's just, that's a recipe for disaster. And then we see at the very end of the episode, we don't see Dolores, but we see that all of the hosts have been murdered, and they're floating in a river, or I don't know, a lake, an ocean. I'm not quite sure. They're on an island, we find out, a big island. All of the parks are. But I don't know if this is like the ocean side or if it's just a big lake. Not 100% sure. And it also looks like none of the people who ran Westworld knew that it was there. And that's when I start to wonder, how big is this park? Like, I need like a legitimate like map of just Westworld that shows me how long it will take. Like, is it the length of California, where it takes you like 15 hours to get to the bottom to top, and that's driving wise? Is it that big? I'm so confused as to how big this is, to where they don't even know that there's either a giant lake or ocean that they could go to. Like, I'm so confused. Anyway, all the hosts are basically dead in the water, and Bernard says, I killed them all. And that's kind of all we know. We see Teddy's there, dead. We don't know if they're dead. They could just be like fake drowning. I don't know. But Dolores is nowhere to go. I don't know if this is a distraction. I don't know if everyone died, so that way they can sort of be awake, like how Maeve did in the first season, where she died and then she like opened her eyes when she was being like fixed or whatever, and then she kind of like saw what was going on type of thing. Like, I don't know if that's gonna happen, and it kind of opens the consciousness of all the other hosts. No clue. I don't know if Dolores wants to be the only one that finds her conscious. I don't know if she's trying to champion all of the hosts to find their consciousness and take over the world. But I don't know. And while this is all happening in the present timeline, which is the 11 days after the massacre, I believe. Actually, no, that doesn't make any sense. It would be the night of the massacre, or like the morning of the massacre, because Maeve had just gotten off the train. So we're in a past timeline, I think, which basically means she is like going through all these things, and she finds the, I never remember his name. He never seemed that important to me in the first season, but apparently he is important. The guy who writes, he's the writer of Westworld. He writes the storylines, and he was always having a fight with Anthony Hopkins' character, because Anthony Hopkins' character, who I'm never going to remember the name of, is, you know, he was, I don't know, he's developing that whole storyline to where he got shot at the end of it. Maeve saves this guy from being eaten by a cannibal, and then basically they're kind of teaming up out of necessity because he's going to try to help her find her daughter. And then she goes and finds Hector, the sort of like that bandit guy from last season. And they're still in love because Maeve has also not found her consciousness, but she is very powerful and she has power over other hosts. She can like turn them off and on, which is crazy. Oh, and then we have, of course, the Man in Black, who we found out at the end of last season is Old William, who is finally happy that he's playing sort of like the greatest game, which is obviously a hint at the old, that old story where men hunt men because they get too bored of hunting other game. This is kind of similar in the fact that he can get hurt now in Westworld, and he's very good at this game, and he's loving it because he's a psychopath, is what he is. He's mentally insane. So overall, I thought this was a really strong opening premiere of Westworld Season 2, and I hope that we don't go into sort of a sophomore slump. I mean, we've taken a lot of times. This premiered in 2016, and it's 2018 now. So they've taken a lot of time. I hope that they really developed some crazy storylines. I like being confused. I like trying to figure out all of this stuff. And also, if this show does not provide an Emmy for Evan Rachel Wood and Tandy Newton, I'm going to be pissed because they are the stars of this show. They are so incredibly perfect. It's insane. Jeffrey Wright deserves something. I think that Ed Harris deserves something for this. And I'm just like, I cannot believe they didn't win last year and or the year before, whenever they were eligible for their Emmy for Westworld Season 1. But they're just... Evan Rachel Wood in this show is dynamite. She is just what makes this whole show work. It is insane. She's amazing. I'm very, very happy that her and Tandy Newton are going to be getting equal pay, which it's crazy to me that they weren't already getting equal pay. I understand that there's bigger names in it, like obviously Anthony Hopkins is a bigger name, but really, like, I knew Tandy Newton and Evan Rachel Wood just as much as I knew James Marsden and Jeffrey Wright and all of those characters. Also, they're the first two names to appear on the opening credits of this show. Like, yeah, you gotta pay them more. Okay, I hope you guys liked my review and recap of Westworld Season 2, Episode 1, the premiere last night. Every Monday, I will be reviewing and recapping the episodes, so you know what? Come back every Monday, and I will also see you guys tomorrow. This week is very good. I've got Back to the Future Part 2. I've also got Avengers Infinity War. I'm seeing Thursday night, so you'll be getting one Friday morning. Very, very happy for that. Also, I'll be reviewing Blockers tomorrow. Oh no, I already did that, didn't I? No, I didn't. I didn't put that up. I will be reviewing Blockers tomorrow. I'm getting confused with all my timelines. Okay, bye.